Good afternoon. I'm Bill Scott. I'll be moderating the session today. Welcome to the Space Shuttle Commanders Forum. This afternoon we have a stellar team of astronauts who will discuss the shuttle missions they commanded, focusing on the 6 orbiters that comprise the NASA fleet. Because we want to give each commander as much time as possible, I'll keep their introductions brief. Their more detailed bios are in your programs there. So here's our team's all-star lineup today. The lead-off commander earned his astronaut wings in the X-15 rocket-powered research aircraft, flying 16 flights to a maximum altitude of 280,600 feet. In 1977, he flew pioneering approach and landing tests in the unpowered space shuttle prototype Enterprise at Edwards Air Force Base. He later commanded 2 orbital missions aboard Columbia and Discovery. Representing the flight test vehicle Enterprise is retired Air Force Major General Joe Engle. With 3 shuttle missions to his credit, 2 aboard Columbia and 1 on Atlantis, our next commander played a key role in returning the shuttle program to flight following the Challenger tragedy. He continues to serve America's space program as a senior executive with the Boeing Company's Civil Space Unit. Representing the orbiter Columbia is retired Air Force Colonel Brewster Shaw. Our next astronaut's career has ranged from distinguished naval aviator to NASA administrator. He too logged mere minutes of flight time testing the unpowered Enterprise shuttle prototype, piloted Columbia on its 2nd flight, and commanded Challenger on the program's first mission to launch and land at night. Representing the orbiter Challenger is retired U.S. Navy Vice Admiral Richard Truly. NASA's first female shuttle commander is a veteran of 4 missions aboard Discovery, Atlantis, and Columbia. She's been to Russia's Mir space station, helped deploy the Chandra X-ray telescope, and led the shuttle return to flight mission after the Columbia accident. Representing the orbiter Discovery, retired Air Force Colonel Eileen Collins. Our next commander is a veteran of 3 missions aboard Challenger, Discovery, and Atlantis, 2 of which were dedicated to Department of Defense payloads. He retired from NASA in 2005 as the agency's deputy administrator and continues to consult for the space community. Representing the orbiter Atlantis is retired Air Force Colonel Fred Gregory. Logging 4 shuttle missions on 4 different orbiters, our 6th commander flew Challenger, Discovery, Columbia, and the maiden voyage of Endeavour. His Endeavour mission featured 4 EVAs, a record for the shuttle program. Representing the orbiter Endeavour, retired Navy Captain Daniel Brandenstein. Now these are all commanders, but before we get started, would every astronaut here today who has flown on the space shuttle please stand and be recognized? Thank you. Okay, Joe, you're up.
I'm sure that my mic is hotter. Will be very soon. Thank you very, very much, Bill. And first of all, I want to say how proud and honored I am to be part of this symposium, but even more so part of this forum. These are some awesome guys up here, and don't let them hear that. If you can blank their earphones out or whatever. But I want to start out. My the airplane I'm representing, I guess, is Enterprise. One thing that I've told a lot of people, in fact, at a couple of interviews with the media, is that as far as CDR or PLT goes, during the approach and landing test program, and in fact during the first 2 flights into orbit, there were only 2 people on board the airplane, aboard the Space Shuttle. Now, the Space Shuttle is a pretty busy airplane to fly, particularly the orbital version. So I think to have a designation of commander and pilot is a little ambiguous. I think really, in my opinion, there were 2 commanders on board the approach and landing test. Richard and I shared the duties. Commanders the only reason you call one commander, I think, is for sizing the noose on the ropes in case something goes wrong. They know which one will fit. But the commanders try, I think, on every mission to distribute the tasks equitably among the crew. And of course, on the ALT program, in the first 2 flights, there was only 2 people on board. And on the ALT, the approach and landing test, particularly on Free Flight 4, which I'll show you here in just a little bit, very short, very brief flight, and the only task really was flying the airplane. So my task was to distribute the flying equitably among Dick and I, and we swapped control of the airplane back and forth. And I'm going to show you on this film when Dick is flying and when I'm flying. And I think in retrospect, I screwed up because I think he got more flying time on that flight than I did. And Richard, we may have to go back and fly that all over again and redo the tasking. Enterprise was a unique vehicle from her siblings. She was never intended to fly into or from space. She didn't have any of the thermal protection system, the Tylon. Instead, she had styrofoam sheets that were molded to be the same thickness as the tile would be in those locations, so that she would have the same outer mold line and have the same aerodynamic characteristics as the aircraft returning from flight. The wing leading edges were not the RCC, the reinforced carbon-carbon, that would absorb the heat entry. She just had molded fiberglass leading edge. I think she had a couple of sections that were actually RCC to test out, but she lost those later on when she went to the Smithsonian. She didn't have the main engine system, the high-speed turbo pumps, all the weight of the hydraulics and stuff to gimbal them. She had mock-up engine bells, again, so that aerodynamically she would look like and give the same drag and characteristics as the airplane coming back from orbit. The outer mold line, aerodynamically, she was an orbiter, but she weighed a good bit less than her siblings, the rest of the orbiters coming down the line. She only weighed about 155,000 pounds, as opposed to around 205 to 210,000 pounds empty weight for the other birds. So she was a lightweight. But her job was very important. Her job was to gather as much aerodynamic data as possible to confirm the aerodynamic database for the flight engineers and the flight planners, to get all the coefficients, the lift and drag coefficients, and the secondary coefficients, the yaw due to roll and roll due to yaw, and all those things, so that the aerodynamists would know about how much margin there was in maneuvering and in that aerodynamic shape, and not have to rely entirely on wind tunnel data, which has some errors and some uncertainties. But our job was important. In addition to gathering as much aero data as possible to confirm all these aero databases, her job was to check out the flight control system, and to check out and modify the flight control system where it was needed. And it turned out we did make some rather significant changes to the gains, to the filters in the flight control system, which I think we have talked about subsequently, and I think we saved ourselves a good bit of embarrassment by coming back and trying to land with less than ideal weather conditions as far as wind gusts and crosswinds and such later on when we got into the orbital flight program. She was to gain also flight experience and maturation on systems like the APUs, the auxiliary power units, and the hydraulics and the computers, how they would play together in a real flight environment, and the displays and controls. The approach and landing test program consisted of 3 different kinds of flights. There was a captive inert program where she was mated to the top of the 747, with no pilot on board, but getting aerodynamic data nevertheless. And then the captive active program, where she stayed mated. We did not separate from the 747, but we would move the surfaces slightly to begin to get some of the data on how effective the surfaces were, actually. Then there was the free flight program. It started out as going to be 11 flights. Then it was reduced to 8 flights, and then subsequently reduced on down to 5 flights. It wasn't necessarily an indication of how successful we were at obtaining data in the flight program. I think they were just really anxious to shorten that program up and transfer the resources to the orbital flight test program. But it ended up, we did fly 5 flights, 5 free flights, 3 of them with the tail cone on. The tail cone is that streamlined thing on the tail end that greatly reduces the drag, increases the lift-to-drag ratio, and allows you to fly a much flatter, more benign profile with the airplane. We had a lot of time on that flight, as a matter of fact. It was a very, very leisurely flight, very comfortable flight, whereas tail cone off, you kept your attention, and you'll see that in the film here, I think. One comment that I would like to make before I get into this film thing is that, and I think everyone probably feels this way too, is that, but I personally am convinced that we will look back on the Space Shuttle program and we'll say, that Space Shuttle, she was the finest, most capable workhorse that we'll ever have had the privilege to put back in our space barn. I don't think we'll... I really sincere. In fact, I'll go on the line and you can quote me on that. And if we ever build something better than the shuttle, I'll eat my words and I'll do it in front of you. I don't think if we ever do it, I don't think we're going to do it. I'm getting pretty old, so we're going to have to do it fast if we're going to get it done. I've alluded to the fact that we tried to share the piloting task during approach and landing test. I've got a short video, and I say short, it lasts about 2 minutes and 20 seconds, I believe. It's not taken away, it's not a section cut out of the, this is the entire flight from separation off the 747 to landing. Now you'll see in this film a bug splat up in the upper left-hand corner. We got that sucker on takeoff, and that was so refreshing to know that we were flying a bug smasher again, and we really loved that. I will tell you, when I'm flying, when Richard is flying, one unique thing that we figured out we could do. It was very difficult to get the desired inputs, the step inputs and the doublets and the rudder kicks and the rolls and stuff, and still maintain the basic parameter that we wanted to give the engineers the data from, like maintaining a certain angle of attack while you make all these step inputs. With the kind of flight control system that the Space Shuttle has, it was very difficult to do. So aside from getting to snivel a flight on the first 2-seated F-16 out at Edwards, because it had an electronic flight control system, Richard and I were able to try out this technique of one of us holding the basic profiles steady while the other was putting test data inputs, overlaying them on. So you'll see that in the film, and I'll point that out. Richard is trying desperately to hold a very accurate profile and manage energy down to touchdown, and I'm doing my best to disturb him by putting these inputs in on the way down. Just let go. Okay, now I want to show you what the film looked like. If you could go ahead and roll the film, and I hope it's, yeah, here we go. Okay, here's the bug right there. We got him right about rotation. Okay, we just separated from the 747, pulled up. Fitz has gone off to the left and nosedived off the left. Richard is pushing over now, and he's got the stick, and I should have pointed out, we're going to touch down up here, and I lost sight of the touchdown point. I gave the stick to Richard, and I said, okay, you got it. I was getting ready to do the input, and I looked out the window, and that's what I saw. He had pushed over to over 30 degrees pitch, and we were coming down like a brick.